9.1 How Global Market Works. International trade today. Countries trade with each other. The goods and services that a country buy from other countries are their imports. The goods and services that the countries sell to people and firms in other countries are their exports. Global trade today is enormous. In 2012, global exports and imports were about $23 trillion, which is 31% of the value of global production. The US is the world's largest international trader and accounts for 10% of world exports and 12% of world imports. Germany and China, which rank 2 and 3 behind the US, lag by a large margin. In 2012, the total US exports were $2.2 trillion, which is about 14% of the value of US production. Total US imports were $2.8 trillion, which is about 17% of the value of total expenditure in the United States. The United States trades both goods and services. In 2012, exports of the services were $0.6 trillion, that is 30% of total exports, and imports of services were $0.4 trillion, that is 16% of total imports. US largest exports are services such as royalties, license fees, banking, business consulting, and other private services. US largest exports of goods are industrial and service machinery. Our largest imports are crude oil and private services. What drives international trade? Comparative advantage is the fundamental force that drives international trade. A nation's comparative advantage is the ability of a nation to perform an activity or produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than any other nation. The opportunity cost of producing a t-shirt is lower in China than in the United States. So China has a comparative advantage in producing t-shirts. The opportunity cost of producing an aeroplane is lower in the United States than in China. So the United States has a comparative advantage in producing aeroplanes. Through international trade, Chinese producers can get higher prices for the t-shirts and Boeing can sell airplanes for a higher price. Both countries gain from international trade. Why the United States import t-shirts? So in the first figure, you can see on the right side illustrates the effects of international trade in t-shirts. With no international trade, domestic demand and domestic supply determine the equilibrium price at $8 a t-shirt and quantity at 40 million t-shirts a year. With international trade, the price of a t-shirt is determined in the world market, not the US domestic market, which is $5 per t-shirt. The domestic price falls to $5 per t-shirt. Domestic purchases increase to 60 million t-shirt a year, and domestic production decreases to 20 million t-shirts a year. 40 million t-shirts a year are imported. Why the United States exports aeroplane? With no international trade, the domestic demand, domestic supply determine the equilibrium price at $100 million an aeroplane and quantity at 400 aeroplane a year. With international trade, world demand and world supply determine the world price, which is $150 an aeroplane. The domestic price rises, domestic production increases to 700 aeroplanes a year, domestic purchases decrease to 200 aeroplanes a year, and 500 aeroplanes are exported.